Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, tmosso@the1916company.com for all of your questions regarding the purchase, pricing, or availability of this watch. Today, we are discussing a watch that was launched in 2008 and made for about 4 years. Part of a year of vintage tributes, the 2008 IWC Vintage Portuguese, you see right here, had companions that were pilots' watches, aqua timers, ingenieurs, but nothing is quite as core to the IWC identity, barring possibly the Mark Series pilots' watches, than the Portugueser. This is reference 5445-01, the Vintage Portugueser, and it is a very true tribute to the reference 325 of 1939. That watch, so named because it was requested by two gentlemen who were the Portuguese importers of IWC. It was to be a wristwatch that was as accurate as a pocket watch. At the time, the only way to do that, when bigger movements were inherently more accurate, was to purpose-build a large wristwatch around an IWC pocket watch caliber. And that's the case here, as you can see on the reverse side. But first, the size. As with all Portuguese, 5445 is a big reference, 44 millimeters in diameter, 10.3 millimeters thick, and from lug tip to lug tip, 51.7 millimeters, with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. The watch is broad and flat, which is to say, though a dress watch, it has a lot of presence, but it's more broad than thick. As you can see, it slides easily under a cuff, and when viewed down the wrist, the lugs have a pronounced taper that helps it fit my borderline-sized wrist. So my wrist is 16 centimeters circumference, and I would wear this quite confidently. I do think if your wrist is any smaller, you're going to want to seek a smaller Portuguese, but this is a good match if your wrist is 16 and up. The strap, high quality, IWC factory strap, calf on the bottom, no crimping, no gouging. Large rectangular symmetrical scale alligator leather on the top, and that combination of qualities usually denotes a very high-grade cut of the hide. There's also a little bit of bolstering to add some volume, and then a lovely traditional IWC beveled and satinated pin buckle. The lugs are polished on their hoods. Everything is satinated in profile. Case back and bezel are polished. You can see that the bezel has several different facets, but its primary facets are this flat plane that is adjacent to the sapphire, and then there's a little bit of a concave at its very edge. We have an IWC Probus Scafusia crown, a good solid watch made in Schaffhausen, and then a bubble-like sapphire designed to evoke the plexiglass crystals of the original from the 1930s and 40s. So it's important to note that prior to the revival of the Portugueser as a regular offering in 1993, it was a very rare watch, with perhaps 600 being made from the 30s through the late 80s and early 90s. So it was a watch often associated with IWC by connoisseurs, but unlike the pocket watches and the pilot watches, through that period, it was very rarely seen. It was only in the 90s that the Portugueser came back on a full-time basis. So this watch is as true to the original from 1939 as possible, which is why it is both a manual wind with a giant pocket watch caliber and not equipped with a date of any kind. So we have Arabic numerals and stick indices, leaf hands, small seconds, a railroad track for reading the minutes outboard, and then a smaller one for reading the seconds. IWC Schaffhausen, not a vintage logo, so to speak, but still neat, handsome, and appropriate. And the dial is a lovely black. As you can see, more matte than any other quality. The hands, leaf style, and the small seconds along with the Arabic numerals, giving the watch a little bit of a similarity to its contemporary, albeit much smaller contemporary, the Patek Philippe 96. These watches come out of the same form follows function 1930s aesthetic. They're just built in very different scales. Now, one feature the watch does have that's contemporary is that it has a hacking seconds function, so you can set it precisely to a reference number. And like many IWCs, there's almost no wobble to the crown. The integrity of the manufacturer is really impressive. Everything feels solid. And there's also exceptionally little dead angle when I turn the crown. Small elements of refinement like that are what you expect from fine German-Swiss watchmaking. And we get more of it on the caseback. Now, the original Portugueser was built around a pocket watch caliber, which, it goes to show, has been influential in subsequent IWC history. So rather than throwing in something like a 6497 or 6498 ETA, IWC designed its own. This is the 98295 from the lineage of the great caliber 98, more in nomenclature and spirit than direct engineering. This is a modern movement. It's huge. At 37.8 millimeters in diameter, it fills this case back. You can see it has a 3/4 bridge like a pocket watch caliber, as well as a very conventional center wheel train architecture, and then IWC's distinctive F.A. Jones extended arrow micrometric index. It has an enormous balance that's almost the radius of the movement, beating away at 2.5 hertz, 18,000 vibrations per hour. You can see that enormous hacking lever, which may be the largest of any kind ever fitted to a watch. It has an overcoil hairspring and 5-position adjustment, two features that make it exceptionally refined. 5-position is the standard you'll find on horlogerie and on chronometer watches, so it's nice to see that here. It's an 18-joule movement because it needs no more, as it is relatively simple in layout. We have solarization on the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel. We have a vintage-inspired extended swan's neck click spring with an extensible click, which is an ancient heritage form that you'll find on German, Swiss, and German-made watches. We've got engine-turned perlage on the base plate, stripes across the bridges. We have polished screws, and then golden chaton cups holding the pivot jewels, just as we would have had in the pocket watch era. The bevel is handsomely applied and neat, and you can see that there's nice satination and beveling to the bridge for the escapement below the balance wheel. Everything here is just gorgeous. Manual wind. It's got a 46-hour power reserve, and all this is water resistant down to 30 meters. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.